Welcome to episode 1 of Geno's Guys, where I'm Connor. I'm joined by Matt, and that's Andrew. We are Geno's Guys for the upcoming 2024-25 season, a brand new show we thought of. We were brainstorming ideas. I'm sure most of you know us from our men's show. How about them Huskies? That's not going anywhere. Believe me, that's staying. We're going to have our biggest year ever over there. But here we're trying to expand a little bit, talk about the women, because UConn women, they're a damn good program, and they deserve the respect. The men have been in the spotlight. I'm trying to say in the spotlight for the past couple of years, but the women have been right there. They're going to be just as good this year, and we're excited about it. We're going to talk about it. So I guess that's pretty much what the show is going to be. If you've seen How About Them Huskies, we're going to try to be pretty much the same. We'll do recaps. We'll talk about like players to watch, stuff like that. But just for the women's side, won't lie. Me and Matt, we're not as into it as some might be. Andrew's the woman expert here. That's a funny way to put it. Andrew's our women's basketball expert, so we'll be probably looking at him early, at least early on in the show, early first few months, even weeks, months, looking to Andrew because he's more into it. But we'll just start with the non-conference schedule, Andrew. I know you have that in front of you. You want to break it down, maybe the biggest games to watch?
Yeah, they've got every year they seem to have one, but they've got a absolute juggernaut of a non-conference schedule. Obviously, they got it their cupcakes. Fort Hays State, that's a big one. Just kidding. That's their preseason scrimmage they have every year. And then BU, USF, Farley Dickinson, and Holy Cross round out the cupcake schedule. But they've got Iowa State at Mohegan Sun. That's hardly an away game. That's just a little. I don't live in Connecticut, so I don't know. You guys are the Connecticut guys. I don't know how far Uncasville is from Stores or Hartford, but I feel like it's got to be decently close.
Probably from Stores, half hour, 40 minutes,
Okay,
somewhere in that
yeah. So that's
range.
hardly a away game, but they've got UNC, a neutral site in Greensboro. And they've got the Baha Mar tournament in the Bahamas, Oregon State, and then the winner of Boston College versus Ole Miss. And as well as that, the Champions Classic just down the road in Brooklyn against Louisville. And then the big one that I'm really excited for, I think I'll be there, is USC in Hartford, who we beat in the Elite Eight. Juju Watkins, I believe it was the Elite Eight. Juju Watkins is coming to Hartford. That'll be packed. And for the reporter I saw on Twitter talking about women's basketball being Caitlin Clark, I know I already posted this, but I really highly suggest that you go to that game because then you'll see real men and women supporting women's basketball because this is not a new thing. We've supported women's basketball I've been a UConn women's basketball fan as long as I've been a men's fan. So that's just complete false report, but I would go to that game. But of all these games, I'm most excited for that one, obviously.
And the men being back-to-back national champions, obviously they're very highly anticipated this season, and there's going to be a lot of great matchups. I feel like this game between UConn and USC is going to be the biggest game in Connecticut, the best show in town all season long. I feel like this one's going to do the most numbers, the most people are going to show up to it. It's going to make the most noise, and I feel like that has really shown how far just women's basketball has come. Look at Juju Watkins, look at Paige Beckers. That's a matchup everybody wants to see. So I'm sure that game will sell out, and it will be, one of the biggest games of the year, men and women's college basketball.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Paige and Juju are the top two players in the sport now that Caitlin Clark is gone. And just that game, it's going to be, like you said, one of the biggest games in the sport, including the men's. I feel like I'm looking at an ESPN, their top, way too early top 25 for the women that came out actually today. So it's not that early. It's from today. UConn's at 2, USC is at 3. So that's a top 3 matchup going down in Connecticut, which is huge. I'm also looking, Iowa State is ranked 8th in this preseason. We obviously, Andrew, you mentioned they'll be coming to Mohegan Sun. I know they have Audi Crooks, that the big girl, the center, she was going off in the tournament. I remember that. And we'll talk about our team, our Huskies, in a little bit, but I feel like that could be an interesting matchup down the stretch once we get there. But yeah, and I mean, I agree that USC is going to be the big game there, but you can't overlook South Carolina, who they're preseason number 1. You got to go to South Carolina this year. I feel like that's a game that happens every year, but I don't know. I don't think we've had too much success against them, at least to my knowledge. Like I said, I'm not the biggest into it, but Yeah, I saw you shaking your head, Andrew. Not the greatest, but I'm glad we're playing them. I feel like for women, you almost have to play these top teams, even in non-conference play. Like that game's in February, so it's not like a typical non-conference you play out in November, December, and then you go play Big East games the rest of the way. That game's in February, so clearly they need to get these games on the schedule. That's going to be a fun one as well.
Yeah, what you said about the big games, like we played Iowa when both teams were out in Portland for the PK Invitational. We did play Iowa in the championship game, and that was Caitlin Clark before she became basically the president here. But there's three huge away games here. First, we go to Notre Dame, South Bend, December 12th. That's going to be a really tough one. They still have Hannah Hidalgo, who basically stole that game from us last year. I was there, Gamble, when Notre Dame rolled into town, and they wiped us. We looked pretty terrible in that game, unfortunately. And then they've got a little later in February, they've got Tennessee. They go to the Lady Vols. Obviously, Pat Summitt's not there anymore, and Muffet McGraw is no longer in Notre Dame, but still two huge games. And then 10 days later, they take on the reigning national champions, which feels weird to say because we're a UConn podcast, at South Carolina. Williams-Brice Arena in Columbia. Never an easy game there. We played them last year in Hartford, lost. We lost to them in the national championship. They are starting to become a extremely decorated team, just franchise in general, and that's definitely the sport at South Carolina. Obviously, they've been in the national championship every year. They lost to LSU, won it last year, beat us. All of this about them. They've got Asia Wilson taking care of the league right now, MVP, the WNBA. So just an insane schedule. I don't know if you guys want to say any more about those three away games, but you've got so many hard games on the schedule, and they still might go undefeated or maybe lose one or two. So just a really hard schedule here for them to roll out.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule now. I'm looking at December. That's a really tough 2 week stretch. It starts December 7th, a Saturday. You're playing Louisville at the Barclays Center in a neutral site game. Louisville, I saw, was in the preseason top 25 that I just looked at. Then later that week on Thursday, the 12th, you have to go to Notre Dame. Then you open Big East play. I don't want to say a game off. You can never overlook a game, but maybe with this team you can. You play Georgetown at home. And then the following week, it's Tuesday, Iowa State at Mohegan, and then that Saturday is USC. So that's a really tough 2 week span where you play four teams that are going to be ranked in the top 25, and that's not including your the Baja Mar Women's Championship, which I'm sure so at least a few of those teams are going to be ranked. So, like you said, a very challenging non-conference schedule. Well, that's no surprise. I feel like every year all the top women's teams play against each other to challenge each other before the tournament. It's just the way it is in the sport.
You mentioned the strength of the non-con schedule. I'm going to kind of carry us over here into the Big East schedule as, there's not much competition, and there hasn't been for a little bit. There's only one other ranked team in that preseason top 25, which is Creighton. Last year went 15-3, 15-1 if you don't count the two losses to us. I'm not sure how much competition they're going to be this year. I mean, they haven't beaten us in 2 years, so I'm sure that it's good to get these preseason matchups out of the way, all these tough matchups. That way we can get into Big East, we can go 18-0, and we can just get to the tournament.
Yeah, Matt, like you said, the Big East, this was a huge talk in the Big 12. A lot of people wanted to leave the Big East because of the women's basketball sake. They've won the Big East tournament. I feel like I said before this, I feel like every year since we've been alive, they've won that tournament. And obviously, this schedule definitely makes up for it. The committee definitely sees that, the Big East isn't the greatest women's basketball conference, but like you said, Creighton, always pretty good. Villanova's been good in the past, so there will be some competition in it, but either way, they just it makes up for it with this hard schedule. And the one thing about their schedule versus our schedule is all our games, like Gonzaga for the men's is the last game, and then it's all Big East. But in between Big East play for the women's, they've got that Tennessee and South Carolina game. So they don't have that on the men's side. They do on the women's. So it's definitely going to be really interesting. But what I want to bring up is the injury situation from last year. To start the season, we had Jana El Alfi and Caroline Ducharme were both out. I think Caroline played 1 or 2 games and then decided to not play because of her previous head injury. But along the way, we lost Ayanna Patterson, Aubrey Griffin, and AZ Fudd all due to injuries. So we had 5 players sitting on the bench, basically running 7 people out there per night. Unfortunate, and we still made the Final Four, which is remarkable. It just tells you how good of a coach Geno is, how good of a coach Chris Daly is. And speaking of them, they'll be celebrated because this is their 40th year together. The greatest coaching tandem that sports has ever seen. Assistant and head coach. Chris Daly's been by Geno's side since he got here. She's an 11-time national championship champion and deserves as much recognition as Geno gets. But yeah, I mean, these injuries have killed us over the past few years. Obviously, Paige and AZ have not played as many games together as we've wanted. But I want to see what you guys have to think about this injury situation. And will it be the same, or do you think we've got enough depth this year where it won't be an issue?
First, I want to say we totally planned this podcast for Geno's 40th. So that's definitely what we did and not just a coincidence. No, but I agree. I feel like the team's almost cursed the past few years, and players, like you mentioned, they pretty much ran a 7-woman, used to saying 7-man, 7-woman rotation. And they only had 9 healthy players pretty much the whole year because Fudd played 2 games, Ducharme played 4, Aubrey Griffin, she was healthy, I think pretty much all of non-conference, then went down because she played 14 games. But yeah, I feel like every year I mean, it's not even exaggerating to say 2 or 3 players that go down either before the season or during the season, early on for the season with injuries. Will that be the case? I mean, I hate to predict it will, but I mean, the way history's gone, I almost feel like you have to say it will. But I agree, the depth is certainly there this year. They brought in a transfer from Princeton, Caitlin Chen. She's going to play a big role. The guards, KK Arnold is back. Ashlyn Shade is back, both for their sophomore years. They're going to play major impacts. They played much larger roles last year as freshmen than I feel like they or anyone anticipated. They combined to start 66 games, which that's a lot for 2 freshmen at a program like this. And they made the Final Four. That's just, don't want to call it miraculous, but I feel like it's along those lines there. But yeah, if everyone's healthy, the depth on this team is pretty scary. It can match up with any team, I feel like, in the country.
And bringing in 3 of the top 25 recruits in the country, Ali Ziebel, #1 recruit, Sarah Strong, and Morgan Shelley. I mean, you're definitely adding a lot of great depth there, not just for this year, but, for the next 4 or 5 years as well, along with AZ Food coming back, AZ Fudd. I always mess it up, but AZ Fudd coming back and, Paige Becker's obviously coming back. I feel like this team has, you know, a great chance this year, next year, and in 5 years. I mean, obviously, competition's tough. I'm very excited for that game against USC, and I guess we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, these recruits are definitely these 4 that we've brought in here are kind of replacements because we did lose Nika Mule and Aaliyah Edwards to the WNBA draft. Luckily not Paige Beckers though. But so Sarah Strong definitely going to replace Aaliyah Edwards. She was our backbone in the paint last year. Her and Ice Brady split time last year. Ice Brady was out for her freshman season, so just another injury. But Caitlin Chen, point guard, definitely going to replace Nika Mule if I had to guess. Either her or KK Arnold. I mean, like Connor mentioned, KK Arnold really did earn her spot. I feel like at a time last year, we would run a lineup that was Paige, Nika, KK, and Ashlyn, and Aaliyah Edwards. So 4 guards just because we were missing all of our forwards. But I think that this team healthy, there's no way that any team in the country beats this team healthy. I mean, even like Morgan Shaley and Abby Zybel off the bench as freshmen, just getting Ayanna, Jana, Aubrey, Caroline, and AZ all back. And then just all our returners, like you said, Ashlyn and KK and Paige. So it's just, I've just been looking at this roster, and this is the most I've felt that this team is national championship ready since the one that made the national championship with Kristen Williams, Avina Westbrook. Everybody knows that team. But I have a really, really hard time believing that this team isn't the 2024-2025 national champions of the women's basketball because this team looks so good, so much depth, and I can't wait to watch this year.
I feel like Paige coming back, that's not it's a sign, but she doesn't come back and they're not going to go down easy. That I agree. I feel like they're due. The women haven't won since 2016. I feel like the whole conversation, at least before the men won their past two, was UConn's a women's basketball school. Well, they haven't won in 8 years, which, I mean, it's crazy to say that's a lot, but for us, it is. It's a long time. But yeah, I feel like they're due. One thing I'm interested in, I want to get your guys' thoughts, then we'll wrap up this first episode, is the big man depth. I'm calling it big man. I don't know if in women's basketball you call it big woman depth, but the big man depth on this team. Because last year, obviously, Aaliyah Edwards was the anchor in the paint. She's gone to the WNBA. She's on the Mystics. You bring in Sarah Strong, the number one overall recruit. But besides that, I feel like it's a mix of like players that have been injured for like the whole season last year and just unproven players. So what are your guys' opinion on that? I feel like that if there's a weakness on this team, I feel like that's it. Sure, Sarah Strong could be like good enough to be play at this level. If everyone else is here, you can't see my other hand. It's there. It could even out, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, that's fair to say. Aaliyah Edwards has been the big, like, down in the paint person since we all started watching. I mean, Olivia Nelson-Adota was here, but we've had plenty of people. But in the last couple of years, they relied on Aaliyah. She always stayed healthy. She did take some questionable shots at times, but she was pretty consistent. She put up a lot of points per game. But I feel like that is a really fair question to ask because it was the same when the men moved on from Sonogo. He was a 3-year guy and then he was just gone. But I think Sarah Strong is going to do really well. She's obviously the number one player in the class for a reason, as well as Jana Alfie and Ice Brady. So I feel like we've got enough depth there, but it will be a question mark. If there's a question mark at all to start the season, it is that just because, you can't just teach somebody how to play that position in an offseason. They got to kind of get a feel for it. So I think it's definitely going to be the question mark because Ice only has one season under her belt, and Sarah and Jana are basically new to college basketball. So yeah, if there's a question mark about this season, it would be that.
Seemed like Geno kind of took a liking to Ice Brady last year at that kind of backup position, averaging 17.5 minutes a game. I'm sure we'll see an increase in that, having mostly her competition be freshmen. I'm sure it'll get bumped up to around 25, 30. So I think a lot of that front court sort of depth is going to come from Ice Brady. Kind of her, and it's just a mix of the freshmen, whoever's hot, honestly. I mean, Sarah Strong coming in obviously is a massive deal, so she'll see a lot of game time too, but I'm sure Ice Brady will play a massive role in this team.
Yeah, I agree. She was pretty much, I know they call it this because I've seen it, the sixth woman on the team because they only had 7 players and she was the main one off the bench. But yeah, Ice Brady's, I feel like the X factor because you need the big man depth, especially I don't know much about South Carolina, but I picture them being a lengthy team. I feel like they always have bigger players. That's something, like I said, it's not our strength this year, but Sarah Strong could be like national player of the year or something. We don't know. But I think that'll just about do it here for this first episode of Geno's Guys. We got guys got anything else to add? Geno's Guys are good. So that'll do it here. I assume a majority of the people watching or listening, this might be the first time you've seen us because the women's team, I feel like, has a pretty different audience than the men. So this is something we're trying out, seeing how it does. We'll definitely try to keep it up during the season. If I feel like you guys are going to like it, you guys really loved our men's podcast. And for those of you that are new, if you're not familiar, we started this podcast in the 2023 season. First year, the men took the title. We could obviously continued it last year. The men took the title. Every single year we've done a podcast about a UConn team. They've won a national championship. So maybe you guys needed us to break the curse. Well, only way to find out is in April. So
We win it, we expect rings.
yeah, I feel like if the Huskies win dual championships in the 2024-25 season, that's something we should seriously consider because we're the luckiest podcast on the internet if that's the case. But yeah, that's all we got for this one. Not sure when our next episode will be. I know at least me and Matt, we're gonna study up more on the woman. I think Andrew knows a lot. I want to be more informed. I don't want to like be guessing with some of this stuff. But yeah, until then, we'll definitely do at least one more episode in October. We'll see how the reception is for it. But yeah, just stay tuned.